This is Andrea Coker with the North Texas Commission. Welcome to the second episode of Topic North Texas, our podcast covering state, federal, and what's happening right here in the region of North Texas. If you watched our first episode, that means my mom and TJ's wife, we thank you for coming back. And we were talking about the propositions that were on the ballot from last week. I don't think you actually got to hear that until after the election was over, but spoiler alert, they all passed. So Texas is looking forward to additional investment in Texas State Technical College, in water. There's some bail reform, some tax issues, from everything from death tax to securities tax that won't happen. All 17 passed, it just like I believe we guessed would in our prediction. And then there were elections across the country. And if you watched the news and listened to the rhetoric, what you heard was it was a big night for Democrats. And I think the grassroots is energized, definitely. And then the old hats on both sides are saying it's a long time until November 2026. That's over a year away.
That's a lot to remember.
It's a lot to remember, and so much is going to happen. So much has happened since last Tuesday. We can only imagine what will happen before a year. So we're excited, but it means we're getting ready. It's time. It's primary season here in Texas. As we sit here and talk, primary filing has officially opened. It opened and it closes on December 8th. So if you're thinking of running, TJ, have you decided if you're going to run for Senate longer?
No, I'm really good as mayor. I'm doing just fine where I am.
Not this time, but it's open until December 8th if you're ready. The big news lately is the governor has announced his reelection. He had a huge party in Houston this weekend where he announced that he will be running. The governor has an unprecedented $90 million on hand. So my guess is we will be saying Governor Abbott for the next 4 years. But I think it's really interesting to take just a moment to talk about some of the things he said in his speech last night. He said, I'm going to read this, "It's time to drive a stake through the heart of local property tax hikes for good." And then voters should be able to abolish school property taxes, vote for any 2/3 majority has to vote for any increase, the right to roll back your property taxes, move appraisals to once every 5 years, and an appraisal cap should be dropped from 10% to 3%. That sets up a huge battle for the 90th session. It sets up some conflict between the governor and cities, if you want to say anything about that as a mayor of a large city.
And again, for those of you who maybe don't know, my name is TJ Gilmore and I work for the North Texas Commission. I happen to be a mayor of Lewisville, Texas. Well, not a mayor, the mayor. But if you don't know Lewisville, 140,000. We're one of the top 30 cities by population. I also serve on the board of directors for the Denton County Transportation Authority. So a lot of these issues live right in my wheelhouse on the day-to-day. And when we talk about the governor's tax reforms, understand that property tax has basically three components. The largest component is your school district. So they run about 70% of that total tax bill is coming from your school district. Now, understand, if you are typically in an urban area, a large chunk of that actually is going back to the state through Robin Hood, or recapture. And it is a way to level the playing field for poorer school districts, ostensibly. But to give you some perspective, Lewisville Independent School District, LISD, here in North Texas, one of the top 10 in terms of size, wrote a check 2 years ago for approximately $56 million that went right back to the state. That goes into the state's general fund, at which point the state then gets to allocate it wherever they want. So it's not truly a dedicated tax going back. It goes in the general fund, and then it gets allocated every biennium. Now, the other two pieces, I told you there was 70% was just in your school district. The other two pieces are roughly 20% for your local municipality and 10% for your county. So that makes up the 100%. So when we're talking about large movements in our taxing rate for property taxes, the vast majority of that is going to impact your public school system. And Texas spends I think it's the largest line item, that and healthcare. Education and healthcare are the two largest line items in our state budget. So these, even a small percentage, can make a big difference. When you think about the last proposal, we were talking about moving the municipal cap, and this was right at the end of the special sessions. They were talking about moving the municipal cap from 3.5% down to 2.5%. And all that means is that if as long as your budget hasn't grown by that percentage, over that percentage, you don't have to go to the voters for that increase, basically. So 3.5%, that's roughly the cost of inflation. That's what you're dealing with to just be able to stay on top of what you're already trying to build and support. Now, cities do get some growth piece in there, so new stuff coming onto the tax rolls each year that gets a pass until the second year. So there's some different nuances to that, but they were talking about that 1% for cities, dropping that to 2.5%. Understand that the impact to and I'm going to use Louisville because I know Louisville. The average home owner family would have saved $11 a year. I would have had to remove 4 or 5 police officers. That's because it's just that, that $4 or $5 adds up over a lot of people. So it wasn't really meaningful tax relief for a city. By the same token, if I can't keep up with the CPI, every year I'm going to be further and further behind. And at some point, we're just going to, instead of having elected officials do the budget, every year our residents will just be voting on the budget. And I don't know if that's necessarily the most efficient form of government, but that's what we are looking at over time.
Well, and most cities in DFW and really all over Texas have been able to actually lower their property tax rates in recent years. It's just that homes are worth more because DFW is growing. It's a great problem to have. We understand it is a problem. Both TJ and I went to the Texas Municipal League Conference last week, 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And what you see are city leaders who understand that property taxes are high. They're also trying to run cities and pay employees and pay police officers and keep their streets up. They want to work with the governor. They want to work with Austin to find a solution to those problems that both kind of satisfies the need to lower taxes for Texans, but also allow them to still fund their police, keep up their parks, fix their roads. And so I think going into the 90th session, you have a governor very determined to make some of these property tax cuts a reality, just like he was very determined to get his school vouchers done and some other of his priorities last session. You're going to see that same intensity to this issue. And so we're hoping to lead the charge with cities to work with Austin to find a solution that works for everyone.
Yeah. And I think that's really the goal, is how do you find something that works for everyone? When I talk to mayors, to give perspective, when I talk to mayors throughout the region, roughly 60 to 70% of their budget is just covering police, fire, and safety. So that budget, you can't even cover it with the property tax. You have to take some of your sales tax revenue and put that in.
And there are laws governing raises, mandatory raises for police and hiring quotas for police. And so they have to be able to make those or they'll be in violation of that law.
Yeah. So you'll get hit with defunding the police.
Yes.
Right. So a lot of fun on that side. But so lots of moving pieces. And when you think about a lot of, in fact, one of the homestead exemption got increased. Think about that in parts of rural Texas where you have counties and cities, towns that effectively, if the average home is underneath that $240,000, I think it is now, they're not collecting any property tax for those homeowners. So it's great for them, but it's putting more and more of the burden onto your businesses. And so when folks talk about the concentration of business and the concentration of population into the urban centers, our tax structure incentivizes that.
We also raised, in one of the propositions that passed, raised the property exemptions for the elderly and disabled, which is great for the elderly and disabled, but it puts a larger burden on businesses, on younger families trying to buy and maintain homes. It's one of those, it's a consequence. We're glad for them for their property tax increase, but we're going to have to figure out, or decrease, we're going to have to figure out how to make that money back to keep our cities flourishing. We care a lot about our cities. People take pride in their cities and their communities here. It's a big part of the Texas culture. And so figuring out a way to do that and still give the governor the property tax cuts he's looking for is going to be, I think, the challenge for all of us in the 90th session.
And I think it's absolutely important that we focus on it, that we have these conversations, because there's always a better way. And if you just get used to doing things the same old way, maybe you've created something that doesn't work in today's world. We see that all the time, where something that was 40 years old now doesn't work anymore, or something that's 100 years old doesn't jibe with what we have capable of doing in today's economy.
We also just, in these propositions that we voted on, took away the ability of the legislature to add any inheritance tax, to tax securities transactions, to tax, what was the other one?
Oh, I'm trying to remember all the but it was several of them. But several.
We're limiting some of the ways we can tax, which really leaves sales tax as the one lever that sometimes we have left to pull. And so that's going to be interesting as Republicans and Democrats really face off. That's kind of a classic Republican Democrat issue, is the raising of sales tax to make up for budget shortfalls.
Absolutely. And you do see some conservatives, some very, very diehard conservatives who are pushing towards that. You look at former Senator Don Huffines, who's run for governor. He's running for comptroller. One of his platform pieces has always been the elimination of property tax.
Eliminate all property taxes and do it all through a sales tax. Yeah. So if you're looking for 20-25%, how much would we think we...
I've heard anything from 23 to 25% added to your sales tax. Some folks argue that it's a regressive tax because it only hits when you spend money. Yeah. So there's some challenges there, but that's, again, you've got to look at all the different pieces. I think my biggest challenge as an elected official locally is that sales tax is incredibly volatile. And so from year to year, it may go up 10%, it may go down 20%. It's just really hard to fund police, fire, streets, all of that when your income is going up and down. Just like if you're at home and you have volatility and you get a really great commission, but the next month you don't have so much, it's really hard to budget and manage for that. So that property tax, diversified tax base provides more stability.
It feels a little like the song we've been singing about tariffs. Sometimes it's the uncertainty that's the most dangerous part of all. Well, so that's what's going on. The governor has said, here's my priority, and I'm ready to go. Like I said, $90 million is a lot to enforce this. He will be really a champion for up and down the ballot races. He'll be second on the ballot this year, and hoping those $90 million will bring out the people he needs to vote. So
correct.
The next one, and it's funny, I am a dedicated primary and runoff voter, so I'm on all the mailing lists. I am already starting to get mail in the attorney general race before any other Texas primary. The attorney general mail has started to hit my mailbox. I'm sure it's starting to hit yours if you too are a frequent primary voter. Mm-hmm. There are 4 main candidates in the Republican side of that, which is Joan Huffman, Chip Roy, Aaron Reitz, and Mays Middleton. Mays Middleton came in hot with $10 million of his own money, so that's why I think he's already hitting my mailbox and probably yours. And then
hit mine.
The others we are seeing with some ad buys on digital, especially. Polling shows that Chip Roy has the largest name ID, but we'll see how that shakes out as they keep spending money. That one is almost certain to go into a runoff, so we will continue, I'm sure, to be talking about that. And then the tiny little Senate race that everyone is talking about across the country.
There's a Senate race?
There's a small Senate race in Texas, and it is strangely, and we're not used to this in Texas, it's an exciting primary on both sides. What you have is Colin Allred, who was against Ted Cruz in the last general election. Came close, but not nearly as close as many had hoped, and that's giving people who maybe would have really liked his background and his vibe. He's a very consistent candidate. He's served in Congress. He has it all on paper, but he's also lost this race once before. And so also James Tallarico, the state representative, has entered the race, quickly raising money.
It's exceeding just about everybody in that race.
I believe he is outraising everybody in that race. It got a lot of momentum. Even the things, I saw some little baby attack pieces on him on the weekend. They're not sticking. He seems to be genuinely in this race to win it and ready to go for the November. But the question mark in all of this is local Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett from South Dallas. She has been serving in what was Eddie Bernice Johnson's seat for the last 3 terms, right. I believe.
And redistricting has got her.
She doesn't live in her district anymore, but her district should still be a Democrat district. But she's got a lot of buzz. She gets on the news. She's great on camera. She's an incredible fundraiser and has been kind of an energizing person in the Texas Democratic Party and really the National Democratic Party. And she has been very coy and saying she's thinking about it. She's looking at it. She doesn't know. And most notably, recently, she said, I will tell you on December 8th what I'm doing.
I can tell you what she's doing between now and December 8th.
And that's raising money.
Absolutely.
She can raise as much money as she wants to from people who think they might be donating to a future senatorial candidate and might be donating still to a congresswoman. So it's given her an incredible way to travel the state, raise a lot of money, go on a lot of neat news shows with this will she, won't she. because the Democrats are all looking at polling of what's happening on the other side of the aisle.
That's right.
What's happening in the Republican primary. It is John Cornyn, Ken Paxton, and now officially, and I don't believe it was official last time we talked, Wesley Hunt has entered the race. He's a congressman from Houston who has entered as the third, some say as a spoiler candidate, to drag this to a runoff election, which would notoriously, in Texas history, be bad for John Cornyn.
Correct.
Or does he really think he has a shot? That's a great question. Everybody is releasing polls. Congressman Hunt has released polls. Attorney General Paxton has released polls, and Senator Cornyn has released polls. Guess what? They're all leading in the poll that they release, which is
amazing how that
standard.
works.
My kids took a poll and said that they're all my favorite child, and we should have pizza for dinner.
Yeah.
So that's about how much stock we give to polls that candidates do and release themselves. Private polling says it is John Cornyn and Ken Paxton pretty much neck and neck right now. But the most interesting thing happened last week, and it's that Senator Cornyn went on the radio and basically said he's continually talking to President Trump. He thinks he's going to get his endorsement, and he thinks he's going to get it soon. If you had said that about most Texas politicians, I would have said, oh, they shot his mouth off about getting an endorsement.
Yep.
Senator Cornyn has been in politics in Texas since God was a boy. And he is not one to shoot his mouth off about anything.
No.
So you know that President Trump's team knew he was going to say that, okayed him saying that. And I think that's incredibly interesting with the timing right after a pretty solid Democrat night last Tuesday night, that President Trump cannot lose Texas. He knows he cannot lose Texas. And he does. And every poll, private, public, everything shows that Senator Cornyn is the strongest candidate if the Republicans want to keep Texas. Senator Paxton puts it in play against several of those Democratic candidates. So find that very interesting. I think by the time we record again, we might know who President Trump is supporting in that.
Yeah, I think that's coming along pretty quickly.
Personally, I have $100 on this race.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty interested.
Okay.
And a quick federal update. We're not going to spend too much time on it, but as we are sitting here today, most of our Congress members are probably, like many of you, waiting for a delayed flight in an airport so that they can get back to Washington and vote to reopen the government. We are hoping by the time you listen to this, and we said this last time, that the government is back open. The Senate voted 60-40 last night to reopen the government with a continuing resolution to last till January 30th. TJ and I just came from lunch with Congressman Moran, and he said he is hopeful that by the time that CR ends, they will have passed appropriations bills in January. I have less hope than Congressman Moran that we're going to get all appropriations bills passed.
He's pretty optimistic.
He was pretty optimistic. It was refreshing to see a little hope in our government officials. So what is interesting to me that we will probably find out on Wednesday of this week is how many Democrats cross over to vote for that continuing CR. And how fast things will get restarted. People will get their back pay fairly quickly. How fast will we get flights back to normal? It's going to be interesting. This is the longest shutdown we've ever had, and also the most complete shutdown we have ever had, especially for this kind of time, because no appropriations bills have been passed. So,
it was pretty intense. Yeah. So we'll hopefully we'll see those funds start to flow back through. We'll see our air traffic controllers. I have a good friend who's an air traffic controller at DFW. It's been stressful, and I don't know about you, but I don't want stressed air traffic controllers.
I would prefer they all feel amazing about their lives and jobs every single day that my life is in their hands. The most interesting thing coming out of this is the spin for both parties and how they're going to make it each other's fault. And then I believe the Republicans are at least united in agreement. This is causing some Democrat infighting. Chuck Schumer is under fire from his own party for ending the shutdown, for figuring out a bipartisan solution. This is going to have some implications in Democratic primaries across the country, and it's going to be interesting to watch.
It will.
And so hopefully we are coming to you from a back in business government by the time this gets launched, and that is
just in time to jump into the holidays, right?
Hopefully everyone gets exactly where they need to be for Thanksgiving.
Absolutely. So a lot of the conversation has been around infrastructure. A lot of what we're dealing with in Texas, especially in this past election, was water. But electricity and energy has been a big piece of that puzzle as well. I think many of us are still traumatized by Winter Storm Uri. And yet here we are talking about the next wave And the next wave, of course, is AI and the infrastructure it takes to support AI. So when you're asking for that cute little Norman Rockwell picture of your family with the giant turkey from your AI to draw that up, that is taking power. It's taking water.
A gallon of water.
Yeah, at least a gallon. Depends on how big your family is. But please don't ruin Norman Rockwell by running him through AI. Okay, it's all right. We can move on from that. But AI provides some really great resources and really amazing services. It's streamlining and speeding up a lot of our industries, but it consumes a tremendous amount of power. Now, historically, Texas has been a very low regulation state when it comes to energy, so it means our cost structure is lower. It also has been a very reliable state. I know many people don't realize that, but historically, our power has been very, very reliable.
We like to choose our electricity as God intended, how Matthew McConaughey tells us to.
Right. So that reliability, that history, that is really playing to our strengths in Texas. But I think what some folks don't realize is that we already have a tremendous amount of the infrastructure necessary. It wasn't that long ago when Richardson was the telecom corridor. They had everything going for them as far as telecom goes. All of the and we don't even remember half of these companies anymore. The MCIs of the world. You know, when Singular. That's you had all of the Bellcore companies, and then they got split up, and then they all came back together, and now they're AT&T. So remembering all of that infrastructure is still in the ground. So putting a data center in North Texas makes a tremendous amount of sense because it doesn't cost me as much to connect to the grid. It doesn't cost me as much to connect to the data infrastructure. So there's a lot of advantage. And I think as a local municipality, you have to take a look at that. One great example is in Louisville. Of course, Wells Fargo has moved into Irving. They just opened their new headquarters. It's a beautiful facility. I think it's 1,400 employees, maybe more. I'm sure I'll get corrected. But just up the street in Louisville is one of their major data centers. And it was an old TI plant. Some of you may remember the Convergence Center. But we didn't get that because we gave some great tax break or we had some magic sauce. We had an old location that had great connectivity, had great access to power, was part of TI's infrastructure, and now here it is, a data center. So that's the kind of repurposing that you're seeing in North Texas. That's the kind of access that you're seeing in North Texas. Now, the challenge is we talked about the massive amount of power and water that those facilities take. Some of them are using non-water alternative cooling alternatives, fluids and those types of things, or they've got a closed circular system so they don't have to just use it up all the time. The other piece is, of course, the power. While we were at TML, we got to have a briefing for mayors and city managers that was from Encore. And of course, Encore is looking at their entire infrastructure, and they've been tasked by the governor and by the state to double transmission lines. So when we're talking about the connection, one of the biggest challenges we've had in Texas historically is that we have a tremendous amount of solar and wind productivity coming out of West Texas, but that power gets generated and then has nowhere to go. There's only a couple of big corridors that can get that power over to the eastern side, to the large urban centers. And so that's a lot of cost. And so we had Senate Bill, I think it was 6. Yep. Senate Bill 6 that came along and said, okay, we're going to help with that, but we're also going to say, hey, if you're a big consumer, one of these, what they call a large load consumer, you're going to give us the power to shut you down if we have a winter storm Uri. We have something that might impact our residents in their health and safety. So that's exciting that the governor and the state put that type of legislation in place. But you can see Encore now making massive investments. And these investments, the problem is by 2031, okay, 2031.
That's not very long away.
6 years from now, 2031, the maximum load on the system is expected to grow by 65%. So how do you get there in 6 years when you have even though we're a light regulatory industry or state, how does industry build transmission lines that are going to increase the power capacity by 65% in 6 years? It's a Herculean task. So that's one of the things you're going to see, I think, being handled over the next couple of bienniums is how do we get more funding or how do we reduce regulation to allow for the acceleration of that type of transmission capacity. Encore's on it. They were talking through that, but when they do that, understand that that's going to mean more transmission lines maybe coming through neighborhoods, or cities are going to be dealing with, different recognition of, oh yeah, this has always been an Encore right of way, but now they're actually going to use it. So with that, I would also recommend that, as we're looking at this, it's coming. The power's going to be here. Texas is going to continue to be a low regulation state. So if you're a local municipality and you're dealing with somebody coming in saying, hey, we want to put a data center in here, I think there's some really key issues that you want to be taking a look at. And I took some notes here, so pardon me while I break eye contact with the camera. But you've got to really understand that you really need those project applicants to provide good, detailed information on what their project impact is. You may have heard some horror stories with data centers where they said, hey, we're going to use 6 gas turbines, but they have 24. And now you're dealing with the air quality problems and noise and the other things. So making sure you've got a good regulatory environment, making sure that you're talking with your local providers of power, water, and saying, hey, we're having this conversation with Project Tornado, but this is what they're talking about maybe having. So making sure that your water providers can fulfill that, making sure your power providers can fill that, so that it's not one of these things where you started off small, but it ballooned, and now your city's in trouble because you've dedicated water resources to them, and you're going to have to take them from other businesses, or you're going to have to take them for your residents. That can be really challenging. So coordinating regionally is going to be a big piece on that. And then I think also you need to be able to negotiate your community benefits from this. So making sure that, hey, they put some preference on local employees, making sure that they are bringing in high-paying jobs. Mm-hmm. They're getting a lot from Texas. They should be able to give stuff in return. And that's just making a good partnership work in this type of environment. You also want to make sure that if you're being approached by one of these guys, you really need to think of it not like computers and rack space. You really need to think of it as a new industrial user. If you use that mindset as far as the types of impacts go, it's not just some computers sitting in a rack room somewhere, but think about it as an industrial user. Where does that best fit in your city? How can you get the most advantage out of that while having the least impacts on your day-to-day residents? I think if you approach it with that mindset, you're going to do all right. We've got some great examples. Red Oak, south of Dallas, has been winning these types of projects now for a while, and you're going to see more of that as we continue to infill. But AI is not going away. Data center need is not going away, and Texas being competitive in this space is not going away. So make sure you've got it on your radar.
Well, and even President Trump announced one of the largest investments in AI in Abilene, Texas. Absolutely. Earlier this year. And so this is not going away. It's going to be a priority for this administration, likely the next administration, regardless of party. So figuring out a way to power them and work with them within our cities to the betterment of our cities, I think, is good for all of us. Absolutely. So that kind of covers, I think, our topics for today. But have you got anything that's been hitting the radar for you on something new and exciting? Any that our listeners should be, or our viewers, whatever you're doing? Is it a podcast thing? I put my stuff on YouTube and then listen to it. I'm going to get a car wreck and they're going to think I've been watching the TV the whole time. That's an unhinged way to do it. It's okay. Yeah. So, TJ and I are both going to recommend something at the end of every episode that we are enjoying that is slightly politics adjacent, at least. Mine is a fiction book this time, and it's one I read last year. It's Mr. Texas by Lawrence Wright. It is an exciting book. A lot of books don't do politics well at all. I think this one gets, if not to everything correct, but at least to the heart of some of the characters that you see in Texas politics. It's a fantastic look at a reluctant politician who gets elected to the state legislature and his journey through that. It's, especially in this interim season when we're not actually actively trying to work in Austin, it's a nice visit to maybe an idealized version of what you think Austin might be.
kind of a local take on Mr. Smith Goes to Washington.
A little bit. Yeah.
Okay, which is my favorite movie. So my take actually is right in the middle of politics because I'm always trying to get good information. Some of you out there have probably already seen this. You go, TJ, why are you so behind the eight ball? But I've actually been listening to Ezra Klein, his podcast over the last couple of months. And his November 1, November 7th, and November 10th episodes, I think, are really good for getting into the head of the Democratic Party, what they're trying to achieve, and what the big thinkers on that side of the aisle are looking at as far as their policy and how they go to war, basically, in the next election. I think it's always important to listen to people from all sides because I think that makes your arguments better, and I think that makes policy better. So Ezra's, I think, doing some really interesting stuff, especially deconstructing this last election. He's also looking at the big ticket Democratic strategies moving forward, because quite frankly, the party's not been doing well. So we'll see. But please, we would love, down in the notes, wherever that is in your YouTube, I don't even know how that works. But let us know if you've got any great ideas or feedback that we should be reading or listening to. We'd be happy to take that under advisement and get more content for the feeds.
Man, because I keep enjoying that I get to say this now, the links for those will be in the show notes.
That's it. So thank you all for taking time with us today. Andrea, anything else?
That's all from me.
All right. We'll see you next time.